Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a stroll and deliver an episode to you while I walk around. I'm Brendan Riley. The sacrifices I make for this podcast. Just kidding. It is raining right now, and it's a sort of very light, drizzly rain. Today I am taking a brief walk after dropping my son off for his last day of middle school, or junior high. Next year he'll be at the high school, and today is the last day he has to go to the junior high, so good for him. But it's raining a bit, so I thought I'd take a little walk, and I wore a sweatshirt rather than taking an umbrella or a raincoat so I wouldn't get a constant noise interference on the podcast. But hopefully I don't trip over everything because my glasses are getting all rained on, so I won't be able to see anything pretty soon. All right, now you've got the environment set, so you're finding yourself, I wonder what kind of episode is this going to be? Wait a second, it's been a while since Brendan's talked about any new games he's played. That's right, it's time for Shooting from the Hip Triple Shot. That's right, Shooting from the Hip Triple Shot is an episode type of episode that I do where I give a quick first reactions mini review to 3 different games that I played for the first time in the recent days or weeks. Generally, I've only played the games once or twice, and I will talk about them for a few minutes each. So just keep in mind, this is not a proper review. I've only played the game once. It's kind of a first impressions thing. That said, let's jump into it. So I have 3 games that I played recently that I want to talk about today. Hence the secondary part of the episode, the triple shot. Shooting from the hip means quick. Triple shot means it's 3 of them. You know, I'm mixing my metaphors. It's an Old West barista joke, I guess. So, 3 games to talk about. The first one I want to talk about is the last one I played in May. This is Hunted, Kobayashi Tower. Hunted is a series of games made by Gabe Barrett. He released 2 of them in 2021. Hunted Mining Colony 421, I think it's called, and Hunted Kobayashi Tower. And then he has a 3rd one coming out this next year, which is slightly bigger in scope and cost. I did back that one on Kickstarter as well, so I'm looking forward to seeing that when it arrives. But Hunted Kobayashi Tower is you play a person with military experience who has gone to visit your wife during the office holiday party, and you found that terrorists have taken control of the building that your wife's office is in, Kobayashi Tower. That's right, and then you have to work your way from floor to floor, fighting off bad guys and trying to rescue your wife before time runs out. If that sounds familiar, it's not Die Hard. Definitely not Die Hard. So Hunted, the Hunted series are these sort of small box, easy to play, quick to play, like 20, 30 minutes, solo games. I mean, you can play them 2-player, but they're really kind of like the Shady Torby Onarimverse games. They're really designed to be played solo. There's a fair amount of luck. You have to resolve things with dice, although you end up rolling the dice quite a few times. So there's some mitigation in statistics. And there's a little bit of mitigation in the actual rolling of the dice. So the way the game works is that you have a variety of different pieces of equipment. Your weapons all have dice on them. So if you have a gun that's got 4 shots in it, you have 4 dice on that gun card. And then you maybe have the little tokens that represent clips on that gun card as well. If you fight a bad guy, you shoot at them and you decide how many shots you want to take, and that's how many dice you roll. And then you discard those dice into the pool. It's a neat system. It's a neat way to keep track of ammunition. It means you get to roll a big handful of dice if you're fighting people. He's also got a couple different sizes of dice, so there are some weapons that are more likely to be successful. So there's like a submachine gun that takes D10s instead of D6s, but the difficulties for the bad guys don't go up. But of course, you don't maybe have as many clips for that or whatever. And so basically the 2 things that you're trying to moderate are your health and your time. Now this does have a kind of cascading effect in that as you get hurt, you have 6 health. Once you've lost 3 health, then you go into the negative part, and it becomes harder to defeat the challenges that the game puts in front of you, which is a bummer because toward the end of the game, you're almost certainly likely to be that way, which means it's more variable or less mitigated toward the end of the game. But it makes sense. If you've been shot a bunch of times, you're not at your full strength, and you're less likely to be able to respond well to complicated challenges. The art design is lovely on the game. It's got this sort of spread of blues. If you think about something being done in grayscale, but think of it as blue scale instead of grayscale, where the top end is white and the bottom end is a sort of very dark navy blue. And then all of the shades of the game are variations on that blue. It works really well. I had a lot of fun with it. I'll continue to play it. It's not amazing or anything. It's not my favorite solo game. I'm trying to think if I like both of the Hunted games better than, better than Castellion. That's hard to say. I like Onirim better, and I like Arion better. I'd say the Hunted games are about equivalent with Castellion for me. Castellion is a really solid solo game as well. I will be interested to see as I continue to play this game over time, am I getting better at the system? Am I getting better at managing the risk, at knowing when to risk and when not to? Ultimately, I suspect it's going to end up kind of like Space Health Death Angel, in that you have to, at some level, you just have to win because the dice came out on your side, and that you really can't without doing that. That said, it was a fun game, and I'm happy to have it, happy to play it again. I think I like it slightly better than the Alien one, although I've played each one only. I played the Alien one twice, and I played Hunted only once, so it's a little early to do that. I think when the third one comes in, I'll do a comprehensive review episode of all three, but I have a little while for that. So that's Hunted, released in 2021 from Barrett Publishing, designer Gabe Barrett, who is the host of the Board Game Design Lab podcast, by the way. And then we got Drew Corkill and Jorge M. Velez as our artists. The next game I want to talk about is called Ringmaster, Welcome to the Big Top. It was released in 2019, designer Justin Gary, artist Rod Mendez from Stoneblade Entertainment. Ringmaster is a small box card game. It has a deck of roughly 50 cards, 52 cards. I didn't count. It's not my game, so I don't have a copy to check that. But it's circus themed. All the cards have circus related art and names and to a little bit degree powers, but so there's a big top and there's a juggler and there's a knife master and a lion tamer and the circus train and a box office. Okay, all the stuff that you'd expect to be related to a circus. In the game, you are going to draw a card and play a card every turn. Unless, sort of like Flux or similar games, there are cards in play that alter how many cards you can draw, how many cards you can play, etc. And your goal is to get a win condition in front of you. There are 3 different win conditions that you can get. One involves collecting a set of similar cards. The other one involves sort of a more varied set, but you need more cards. The third one involves a different kind of set. So it's all set collection in some way or another. And in the game, you are collecting these items and putting them in front of you, but you're also having to monitor what the other players are doing. From one perspective, this game is not very interactive because you don't really know you don't really have very much control over the other players. On the other hand, there are quite a few cards that interact with the other players, and if you aren't paying attention to what they're doing, you'll lose. This game, it feels a little bit like something like Kill Dr. Lucky, or even not in the same scale of complexity or depth, but something like Nanty Narking, or even Inish, which I haven't played, but I understand it works the same way, where if you can't stop the other person from winning, then they'll win. And Ringmaster has a little bit less of that because you win when you achieve the win condition. But if you're watching the other players, you can tell when they could. And so then you have to stop. We played 2 games of this, and in the second game, I was setting myself up to win, and one of the other players could tell what I was doing. She's like, watch out, on his next turn, he's gonna pull a card from a discard and we'll lose. But there was nothing they could do. Whew, scared me. But there was nothing they could do to keep me from doing that. The art is beautiful, although pretty muted in tones. It's all sort of dark, velvety tones. I'm not sure that's actually a word to describe color, but that's what it feels like to me. It's reminiscent of old-timey circus stuff. I can definitely see this being a game where if you have a group of people who've played it a lot, it'll play really fast. It'll be the kind of game where you can, once you all know the cards, there's not that many different cards. You can kind of play without focusing just on the game. You could chit chat about about daily lives or whatever while you're playing. But the interaction of the players in the game and the intricacies of achieving a win condition or not, they're interesting enough that I think this is a game that could certainly hold up to long-term play. Now, we played 3-player, and I thought that number worked well. 4 players probably just as good as 3. I don't know if it plays 5 or not. I feel like 2 would not be the same game. It wouldn't be quite as fun, just because all those take-that cards would go directly against the one other person. So I'm not sure whether that would be as good as some of the more interesting dedicated 2-player games. You know, you got your Lost Cities, you got your Shot and Totten, you have Hera and Zeus if you want something with a little bit more board presence. You have Strife, Legacy of the Eternals, if you can find a copy, which you can't, probably. Now, there might be a copy used on Board Game Geek. But all of those games, I think, would be better for 2 players. For 3, this was pretty good. I can see why people would like it. It's a little heavier than Love Letter, but it reminds me a bit of Love Letter in terms of it's the kind of game where if everybody knows it at the same level, it's probably the most fun. So that's Ringmaster. Welcome to the circus. Welcome to the big top. Justin Gary, designer. So the third game I'm playing here is one of the ones I've been trying to get played for a long time, and it took our conversation with our neighbors to get it done. So this is The Sinking of the Titanic, 1975. This is a game I bought as a whim fairly early in my board game collecting journey because I'm a Titanic enthusiast. I've mentioned that before. I really like stuff about the Titanic, and so when I encounter a board game about the Titanic, you're right, I want that game. And I'm excited at the chance to get it. This game in particular is sort of famous because of its physical components. The game comes with a board, and half of the board is a picture of a sort of fictional ocean with some islands on it. And then the top half of the board is the night sky. In between the bottom half and the top half of the board is the Titanic itself, a model of the ship with spaces to move around. And it's on a swivel, and it's got an arrow on it. So the way the game works is you set up the board, and each player represents a crew person who's been assigned to rescue particular passengers. And the way that you know who you're rescuing is you draw a card, and it gives you a number, and that number points to the stateroom for that passenger. Then you have to go to that stateroom, and if you land on the space for that, it's a roll and move game. If you land on the space for that stateroom, then you reveal that passenger, and you've now rescued them. They're in your group. And your goal before the ship sinks is to get 2 passengers, 2 barrels of water, and 2 crates of food. Once you have those 3 things, and you can do this earlier, but once you have those 6 things, then you go to a lifeboat and hop into a lifeboat and wait to be launched. Now, you can go to the lifeboat earlier because there are chances in the second half of the game to pick up more of those things. If you fail to get to a lifeboat by the time they're all gone, then you lose everything you've collected and you start in the water with nothing. So if you know your Titanic history, once everybody was in the water, it was several hours of waiting, and then in the morning, some rescue ships came and picked people up. Anybody in the water froze to death for the most part. There were a handful of people who were pulled out of the water by the lifeboats, but not very many. In this game, the water is warm enough that you can swim to one of the neighboring islands. And the way the game works is if any of the lifeboats get put into the water without people in them, they drift to one of the neighboring islands, and then you can swim to that island to get your lifeboat. Then once you have your lifeboat, then you sail around the North Atlantic, visiting islands and encountering stuff in the water, trying to pick up 2 passengers, 2 food, and 2 water. You can also stop your lifeboat next to another player's lifeboat and steal one of their things. It's pretty dumb historically. It doesn't make any sense, but it was a fun goof. This game is not good from the perspective of modern hobby gaming. It's amusing from the perspective of somebody who's interested in classic games, somebody who's interested in the historicity of the way the Titanic is talked about in culture. It's an interesting game, but ultimately you're just trying to find food and water, and it doesn't make any sense. Also, interestingly, it was made in 1975, which is 62 years after the ship sank, meaning that there were lots of people who were alive when the ship sank, people in their 20s and younger, who were still alive when they released this game. And it was seen as pretty poor taste, so much so that, as I understand it, the second printing of the game was just called Abandoned Ship. It was not called The Sinking of the Titanic. Yeah, this is not, like I said, it's not a good game. It's worth playing for the novelty of it, and I'm glad to have it in my collection, but it's more for the collecting part rather than for the game part. That's The Sinking of the Titanic, designer uncredited, Milton Bradley, 1975. So what new games have you been playing lately? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and share your gameplay experiences there. I'd love to hear them. Or you can drop me a line. Wombat929 is my username on Board Game Geek. I also have an account at Boitaju, Board Game Arena, or yukata.de, all three of which Wombat929 will get you to me. I would love to hear from you. In the meantime, thanks for joining me on my walk. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.